Kassadin in the jungle? Yes, and it's better than you might initially think. Okay, so let's assume for a moment it is viable. But why Kassadin and not some meta jungler like Elise or Lee Sin? Because it's fun. Joking aside, there are some awesome advantages for taking this Void superstar, and also some disadvantages. Here are a few of the major ones. The pros. Jungle clears in the mid to late game is nearly instantaneous. Kassadin can inherently take turrets faster than most because of the ease of proccing Sheen and with the use of W auto attack animation cancelling. Has powerful ganks with the slowing E and gap closer R. High mobility, which allows counter jungling and counter ganking potential. Exceptionally strong carry potential. Snowballs extremely hard off of early kills. Fantastic split pusher because of high mobility, damage, and acceptable wave clear. Now that's a ton of positives. Why would we ever play anything different? Thing is, to get those pros, you have to get past a few debilitating cons. The cons. Kassadin pre-6 and pre-Runic Echoes is absolute steaming garbage. Your team will absolutely hate you for the first 10 or so minutes because you can't do anything, for the most part. If you come into lane with an E charged up, then maybe you can make something happen, but it's not reliable since your damage early is both difficult to output and generally quite low. This awful early game can also be exploited by the enemy team's jungler incredibly hard if they're competent. A Lee Sin, Kindred, or Nidalee, for example, will completely wreck you. But really, besides this incubation period where you're worthless, Kassadin is actually quite good in the jungle. Here are a few more minor cons, however. Itemization is fairly narrow. I more or less only got just a single build to work with a few optional items. The AP Assassin one. Other items like Cinderhulk, the Devour, 80 items, defensive item builds, none of them worked well. He's incredibly difficult to play. It's going to take you at least a dozen games to get into the swing of things, even longer to learn the normal intricacies of regular mid lane Kassadin play. I hope this guide will help alleviate this, but you can beat just good old practice. That's a lot to take in, so here's the essential information. The early game is garbage, everything else is paradise. The early game. Okay, so we know the early game is painful, but we still have to do it. Start with your duo lane and take the camp closest to lane, as you usually do. However, unlike most, we're going to skip the buff camp and go straight to the next camp after it. After that, continue through one more regular camp, then the buff, and then back. If you can get that last camp in, go for it, but I usually can't. It's a bit complicated to type out, so here's a visual example. We do it this way because we used our smite on the very first camp. We absolutely need to smite to take down a buff, however, so we wait through the early camps and save a buff for when we have smite back up. It seems dumb and overcomplicated, but trust me, this is the best way to do it. I've route optimized this as much as I possibly can without completely deviating from a normal clear. Don't attempt to go for a Scuttle card because if you run into just about any other jungler, you'll have to burn at least a flash, assuming you don't die. Anyway, when you get back to the jungle, just keep clearing camps until you hit 6 and have Runic Echoes. If you're absolutely certain you can get a kill from a gank, then go for it, but don't press your luck. It's much better to farm up until 6 than waste time catering to your teammates whining. The mid game and beyond. Finally! Assuming your team hasn't already effectively lost, you're now in control of the game by around 10 to 15 minutes. Gank the ever-living hell out of every single lane. Don't even farm the jungle anymore. Farm champions. Getting kills with just a single item and having the ultimate available is a flippin' breeze. After those kills, take turrets with Kassadin's great turret taking power with a W auto attack reset and Sheen procs if you have it. The mid game is easy, it's fun, it's one of the most terrifying power spikes in the entire game. Exploit it. The item build. There's pretty much only one build I would recommend, although you can feel free to experiment in your own time. The build is almost always Skirmishers, Runic Echoes. Runic Echoes, because of the scaling ability power and movement speed, it allows us to visit lanes faster and put out an incredible large amount of burst in a very short amount of time. And the Skirmishers is so we can, hit those high priority targets and bring them down without getting too low ourselves. Or just general dueling. Iceborne Gauntlet, because of the Sheen procking and because it slows people around it. And it also gives you defensive stats. So everything is just spectacular. And also it's not as expensive as something like Trinity Force, where Trinity Force also gives us a lot of stats we don't necessarily need. Iceborne is like the perfect item right now. And also bring a little bit more utility so you're not completely useless if you're behind. Merc Treads gives us a bit more magic resist so we can kind of be a bit more of an ability power assassinator. And it also stops us from being stopped, because if we stop, we're dead. That's why you have the ult and you have to use it carefully. You cannot stand still. Then fill in with a small pool of options, including Rabadons for damage, Void Staff for damage, Dead Man's Plate for a bit of armor and health, and the Banshee's Veil for magic resist and health. So that's Kassadin Jungle. It's not the best jungler by any means, but it sure as hell will be fun, unexpected, and absolutely dominating if you can make it to the mid game.